The Krelvan Empire had ruled the Perseus Arm for 300 years, and nobody dared to challenge them. Their warships were massive, and their weapons could tear through planets like paper. When they found the human colony on Kepler 442b, they did what they always did, and sent a message demanding total surrender. Admiral Jacob Manning stood on the bridge of the TSS Defiance and read the message with a calm expression that his crew knew very well. It was the look he always had right before something interesting was about to happen. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems, and everyone was waiting to see what the Admiral would do. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan sat at the communications station, and her fingers moved across the controls as she translated the alien message. She looked up at Manning and spoke in a steady voice that barely hid her concern. "They are giving us 72 hours to evacuate the entire colony, and after that, they will start bombing the planet from orbit." She paused and added that the Krelvan commander was not interested in negotiations or discussions. Manning walked slowly to the main view screen and looked at the image of the Krelvan fleet hanging in space like predators waiting to strike. "How many ships did they send?" he asked without turning around. His voice was calm and almost casual, as if he was asking about the weather instead of a potential massacre. Kate checked her sensors again, and her face went pale as she read the numbers. 47 capital ships, sir, and that includes 3 dreadnoughts and multiple carrier groups?" She did not need to say what everyone was already thinking. The entire Terran defensive fleet in this sector had only 12 ships, and most of them were smaller frigates and destroyers. The math was simple and terrifying. Commander Lisa Grant moved closer to Manning, and her boots made soft sounds on the deck plating. "Sir, we need to contact Earth Command immediately and request reinforcements." Her voice was urgent but professional, and she kept her emotions under control like a good officer should. "We cannot win this fight with what we have here." Manning turned to face her, and there was a small smile on his lips that made Grant feel both relieved and worried at the same time. "Oh, I already contacted them, Lisa, about 2 hours ago, actually." He said it so casually that for a moment Grant thought she had misheard him. She stared at the Admiral and waited for him to continue. "And what did they say?" Grant asked quietly. The rest of the bridge crew had stopped pretending to work and were listening to every word. This was the moment that would decide if they lived or died, and if the colony below them would survive or burn. Manning's smile grew a little wider, and he clasped his hands behind his back in a relaxed posture. "They told me to hold position and handle it." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Handle it against a force that outnumbered them 4-1 with weapons that could crack moons in half. Grant felt her stomach drop, but she kept her face neutral. "Sir, with all due respect, how exactly are we supposed to handle an entire Krelvan armada?" She was not questioning his authority, but she needed to understand the plan because right now it looked like they were all going to die. Manning walked back to his command chair and sat down with the ease of a man who had nothing to worry about. "Kate, open a channel to the Krelvan flagship, and make sure they can see me clearly." Sullivan's fingers flew across her console, and within seconds she nodded to indicate the channel was open. The view screen changed, and now showed the interior of the Krelvan flagship. Commander Zekthar stood in the center of his bridge, and he was everything humans expected from the Krelvan. He was 7 feet tall, with red scales that looked like armor, and 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. His eyes were yellow and cold, and his translator made his voice sound harsh and mechanical. "This is Admiral Jacob Manning of the Terran fleet, and we have received your ultimatum." Manning spoke clearly, and his voice carried across the light years between the 2 ships. "Here is our response, and you should listen carefully because I will only say this once. The answer is no." Zekthar's eyes narrowed, and his claws flexed as if he wanted to reach through the screen and tear Manning apart. "You dare refuse us, and you think your 12 primitive vessels can stand against our armada? This is not courage, human. This is suicide, and you will die for nothing." Manning leaned forward in his chair, and his smile never wavered. "Maybe you are right, Commander, or maybe you should ask yourself why we are not running away." He let that sink in for a moment, before continuing. "We have had 2 hours to evacuate the colony and gather our ships and run to safety, but we are still here, and all our ships are in formation waiting. Does that not seem strange to you?" For the first time, something changed in Zekthar's expression. and it looked almost like doubt or maybe fear. "What are you saying, human, and what trick is this?" His translator could not quite capture the uncertainty in his voice, but Manning heard it anyway. "Let me tell you something about humans, Commander, and this is important, so pay attention." Manning stood up and walked closer to the view screen. "We have been fighting each other for 10,000 years, and we have perfected warfare into an art form. We have turned physics into weapons, and chemistry into death. And when someone threatens our colonies, or our people, we do not run away screaming." He paused, and his smile disappeared completely. "We plan, and we prepare, and we make sure that anyone who attacks us regrets it for the rest of their very short lives." Zekthar tried to look confident, but Manning could see the cracks in his armor. "Your posturing means nothing, human, and we will crush you like insects." But his voice did not sound as certain as his words suggested. "You are welcome to try, Commander, and I will not stop you," Manning said pleasantly. "But I would recommend that you run a deep scan of the asteroid field behind your fleet first, and check it very carefully." He leaned in closer to the screen. 72 hours, Commander, and the clock is ticking for both of us, but I think you will find that time is not on your side." Manning made a cutting gesture, and Kate closed the channel. The view screen returned to showing the Krelvan fleet and the asteroid field beyond it. The bridge was completely silent, and everyone was staring at their admiral as if he had lost his mind. Grant was the first to speak, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "Sir, there is nothing in that asteroid field, and we have not had time to mine it or set up any defenses or weapons platforms." "What are we doing?" Manning sat back down in his chair, and his smile returned like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "I know there is nothing there, Lisa, and you know there is nothing there, but they do not know that." He gestured at the view screen where the Krelvan fleet was already starting to move, and their sensors were scanning the asteroids. "For the next 72 hours, they are going to tear themselves apart trying to figure out what we are hiding in those rocks, and they are going to imagine all sorts of terrible weapons and traps." But Sir Grant started to say, but Manning held up his hand. "Humans do not just fight with guns and ships, Lisa, and we do not just throw our bodies at the enemy and hope for the best." Manning looked at each member of his bridge crew in turn. "We get inside their heads first, and we make them afraid, and we make them doubt, and we make them wonder what we know that they do not." He turned back to the view screen. "That commander out there is already questioning his intelligence reports and wondering if humans are really as primitive as he thought. And in about an hour, he is going to start imagining that we have super weapons hidden in those asteroids." Kate spoke up from her station. "Sir, the Krelvan fleet is moving into a defensive formation, and their sensors are going crazy, scanning everything." It was true, and on the tactical display, the alien ships were spreading out, and their weapons were pointed at the asteroid field instead of at the human colony. Manning nodded in satisfaction. "Perfect, and now we wait." He looked at Grant, and his expression became serious. "I bought us 72 hours. Lisa and Earth Command knows we need help, and they are sending it, but until it arrives, we need to keep the Krelvan confused and off balance." He smiled again. "Humans are very good at psychological warfare, Commander, and we have been doing it since we lived in caves and threw rocks at each other. The Krelvan are about to learn that the hardest enemy to fight is not the one with the biggest guns, but the one who makes you fight yourself first." The bridge crew slowly returned to their duties, but everyone kept glancing at the view screen where the Krelvan fleet sat waiting and scanning and wondering what the humans were hiding. Manning sat in his command chair and watched the enemy ships with calm confidence. The first move was complete, and the Krelvan had taken the bait. Now all he had to do was keep them on the hook for 3 more days and hope that Earth Command came through with reinforcements. It was risky and dangerous, and could easily end with everyone dead, but Manning had played this game before, and he was very good at it. Humans always smiled when challenged, because they knew something their enemies did not, and they knew that fear was often more powerful than any weapon. 60 hours had passed since Admiral Manning sent his message to the Krelvan fleet, and the enemy ships still hung in space like wolves circling prey. Their sensors swept the asteroid field constantly, and their weapons remained powered up, but they had not advanced, and they had not fired a single shot. Commander Zekthar was learning his first painful lesson about fighting humans, and that lesson was that sometimes the mind was more dangerous than missiles. Aboard the TSS Defiance, the crew worked in shifts, and everyone was exhausted from the constant tension. Lieutenant Peter Brooks sat at the sensor station, and his eyes were red from staring at screens for too long. He was monitoring the Krelvin fleet when suddenly his console started beeping with an urgent priority code. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission, and it is encrypted with Sierra 7 protocols." Manning was on his feet instantly, and his fatigue disappeared like smoke in wind. Sierra 7 meant only one thing, and it meant that the reinforcements from Earth Command had finally arrived. "Put it through to my ready room immediately, and Lisa, you come with me." Commander Grant followed him off the bridge, and the door closed behind them with a soft hiss. Inside the ready room, Manning activated the secure terminal, and the screen flickered to life, showing the face of Captain Helen Drake. She commanded the TSS Phantom, and she was famous throughout the fleet for developing Earth's stealth ship program. Her ships could hide from any sensor system and appear out of nowhere like ghosts in the dark. "Jacob, we are in position, and all 16 ghost ships are deployed throughout the Krelvin formation." Drake spoke without wasting time on pleasantries. "They still have not detected us, even though we are practically sitting in their laps." Her smile was sharp and dangerous like a knife in the dark. Manning felt relief wash over him, but he kept his voice calm and professional. 16 ships and Earth Command sent the entire stealth wing. He had hoped for maybe 4 or 5 ghost ships, but 16 was beyond his expectations. "What have you learned about their fleet?" Drake pulled up a tactical display, and Manning could see the Krelvin ships marked in red and the invisible human stealth ships marked in blue. "We have been mapping their shield frequencies and weapon systems and command structure for the past 12 hours. She pointed at several key vessels. "Their technology is advanced, but their security protocols are terrible, and we have already infiltrated their tactical network. They are good at building big ships, but they are not good at protecting their computer systems." Grant stared at the display, and her mind was racing with possibilities. "How is this possible? And we do not have 16 stealth ships in this sector." She looked at Manning with confusion and a hint of accusation. "Sir, you said we only had 12 ships total." Manning nodded and gestured for Drake to explain. "We did not have 16 stealth ships here until Earth Command decided to stop playing fair." Drake grinned, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. "They jumped them in from 3 different sectors, and they have been hiding in the system for 2 days, waiting for the right moment to strike." "So the whole time we were stalling," Grant said slowly, "and the Krelvin were scanning asteroids, you knew we had backup coming." It was not a question, but a statement of fact. Manning just smiled and said nothing, which was answer enough. "Helen, what is the attack plan?" Manning asked, and his tone became serious. "We have one chance to do this right, and if we mess it up, we will all die very quickly." Drake pulled up more tactical data and highlighted specific ships in the Krelvin fleet. "We have identified their flagship and the 3 dreadnoughts and all their carrier groups. When you give the signal, we are going to simultaneously disable their main reactors using focused electromagnetic pulse weapons." She traced lines on the display, showing which ghost ship would target which enemy vessel. "They will be dead in space for approximately 14 minutes before their backup systems can engage." 14 minutes, Manning repeated, and he was already calculating how much damage his visible fleet could do in that time. "That is a very long time in a space battle." "Long enough to cripple half their fleet," Drake agreed. "Your visible ships will engage their forward elements and draw their attention to the front. We will hit them from inside their own formation, and by the time they understand what is happening, their command structure will be in chaos." She looked Manning directly in the eyes. "This will work, Jacob, but there will be casualties on both sides, and some of our people might not make it home." Grant spoke up, and her voice was quiet but firm. "Sir, there are going to be deaths, and a lot of them. Are we really ready to start a war with the Krelvin Empire over one colony?" Manning's expression hardened, and his voice became cold as ice. "I gave them 72 hours to reconsider their attack, and I have been broadcasting warnings on all frequencies in their own language." He walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. "I explained that humans prefer peace, but excel at war, and I told them exactly what would happen if they stayed. They chose to stay, and they chose to threaten our people, and now they will learn why that was a mistake." He turned back to Drake, and his face was set like stone. Synchronize with all vessels and we attack in 12 hours at exactly 0600 ship time. Make sure every captain understands the plan, and make sure they know this is not about revenge or glory. This is about sending a message to the entire galaxy that human colonies are not targets and human lives are not negotiable. Understood, and phantom out, Drake said, and the screen went dark. Grant looked at her commanding officer and she could see the weight of command pressing down on him. Sir, you knew reinforcements were coming the whole time, and the asteroid field bluff, and the psychological warfare was all just to buy time for the Ghost Wing to get into position. Partially, Manning admitted, and he sat down heavily in his chair. But it was also to give them one last chance to leave, and to show them that humans do not bluff without reason. He rubbed his eyes and suddenly looked very tired. Humans are not monsters, Lisa, and we do not want to kill anyone. But when someone threatens our families and our children and our future, we will do whatever it takes to protect them. He met her eyes, and his gaze was steady. And we will do it with a smile because we know something the Krelvin do not know. What is that, sir? Grant asked quietly. That we have already won, and they just have not figured it out yet. Get some rest, Commander, because in 12 hours we are going to show the galaxy what happens when you challenge the Terran fleet. The next 12 hours passed slowly, and every crew member on every Terran ship prepared for battle. Weapons were checked and rechecked, and shield generators were calibrated, and emergency medical teams prepared their stations. Manning walked through the corridors of his ship and stopped to talk with crew members and offer words of encouragement. He knew many of them were afraid, and he did not blame them because he was afraid too, but fear was not weakness, and courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. In the fighter bay, pilots ran final checks on their small craft, and mechanics made last-minute adjustments to engines and weapons. In engineering, the reactor crews monitored their systems and made sure every power conduit was running at peak efficiency. In medical, the doctors and nurses laid out surgical equipment and prepared beds for the wounded they knew would come. On the bridge, Manning sat in his command chair and watched the chronometer count down the final minutes. Kate Sullivan sat at her station, and her hands were steady despite the tension in her shoulders. Peter Brooks monitored the sensors and watched the Krelvin fleet for any sign they suspected what was coming. Lisa Grant stood beside Manning's chair, and her face was calm and professional, but he could see the worry in her eyes. All ships report ready, sir, Brooks announced as the clock hit 5 minutes to 0600. Ghost Wing is in position and waiting for your signal. Manning took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Open a fleet-wide channel, Kate, and make sure everyone can hear this. Sullivan nodded and indicated the channel was open. This is Admiral Manning to all Terran vessels, and in 5 minutes we are going to engage a superior enemy force, and many of you are wondering if we can win. He paused and let his words sink in. The answer is yes, we can win, and yes, we will win, because we are fighting for something the Krelvin do not understand. We are fighting for our homes and our families, and for the principle that no one gets to threaten human lives without consequences. He stood up, and his voice grew stronger. The Krelvin think we are weak because we have fewer ships, but they do not understand that humans have been fighting since we lived in caves, and we have spent 10,000 years learning every way there is to kill each other. Today we show them what that experience means, and today we prove that challenging the Terran fleet was the worst mistake they ever made. All ships stand by, and prepare to engage on my mark. The final seconds ticked away, and the bridge was silent, except for the hum of systems and the breathing of the crew. Manning watched the Krelvin fleet on the viewscreen, and he saw their ships hanging in space, confident and unaware of the ghosts hiding among them. He thought about all the families on the colony below, and all the children who would grow up safe because of what was about to happen. He thought about all the future colonies humanity would build, and all the species who would think twice before threatening them. Time, Manning said quietly, and his voice was steady as rock. All ships engage and show them why humans smile. At exactly 0600 hours, the space around Kepler 442b exploded into chaos and fire. The TSS Defiance accelerated forward, and her sister ships spread into a delta formation as they charged directly at the Krelvin fleet. To the aliens, it looked like a desperate suicidal attack and exactly what they expected from an inferior force. 12 small ships against 47 massive warships, and the Krelvin opened fire immediately with every weapon they had. On the bridge, Manning stood calm and steady while his ship rocked under the impact of enemy weapons. Shields holding at 73%. Ensign Ryan Clark called out from the defensive systems station. His voice was tight with stress, but he kept his focus on his instruments. Hull integrity is good, and all systems are nominal. All ships execute pattern Sierra 9, Manning ordered, and his voice cut through the noise and chaos. Make them chase us into the asteroids, and stay tight on the formation. The Terran ships dove toward the massive asteroid field, and they weaved between the giant rocks with precision that came from months of training. The Krelvin hesitated because their larger capital ships could not follow as easily without risking collision, and they began to spread out, trying to flank the humans from multiple directions. Exactly as Manning had planned, and exactly as the Krelvin were supposed to do. Now Helen Manning whispered, and though no one else heard him, he knew that light years away Captain Drake was giving the same order to her Ghost Wing. Throughout the Krelvin fleet, 16 invisible ships suddenly revealed themselves not on sensors but in effect. Focused electromagnetic pulses lanced out from point-blank range, and each one targeted a specific vessel's reactor core with surgical precision. The pulses did not destroy or explode but instead disrupted and cascaded through power systems that had been designed by engineers who never imagined this kind of attack. In 14 seconds, 18 Krelvin ships went completely dark, including all 3 dreadnoughts and the flagship itself. Commander Zekthar's furious face appeared on every Terran screen, and his translator could barely keep up with his rage. "What is this? And what have you done? And this is treachery." His bridge was dark except for emergency lighting, and his crew scrambled to restore power. "We had agreements and rules of engagement." Captain Drake's voice replaced Manning's in the reply, and it was broadcast to every ship in both fleets. "This is Captain Helen Drake of the Terran Ghost Wing, and you are currently experiencing the results of challenging a species that weaponized splitting atoms before we achieved orbital flight." She sounded almost amused. "Your reactors will restore in approximately 13 minutes, and I suggest you use that time to consider whether you really want to continue this fight, or whether you want to go home and tell your empire that humans are not easy prey." But the Krelvin were warriors by culture and tradition, and surrender was not in their nature. The remaining 29 active ships turned their full attention to the now visible stealth ships, and they poured fire at the Ghost Wing with everything they had. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, and several ghost ships took damage as they scattered and ran. "All ghost ships scatter and evade," Drake commanded, and her voice was sharp and clear. "Visible fleet, you are clear to engage, and show them what human tactics really look like." What happened next would be studied in military academies and war colleges for the next 100 years. The Terran vessels did not fight like the Krelvin expected, and they did not match dreadnought against dreadnought or trade beam fire at long range. Instead, they fought like humans, and that meant unpredictable and adaptive and absolutely ruthless in their efficiency. Lieutenant Commander Sam Torres commanded the TSS Ranger, and he demonstrated the principle perfectly. His ship dove beneath a Krelvin cruiser and matched its trajectory with precision that seemed impossible. When the cruiser tried to rotate and bring weapons to bear, Torres rotated with it and stayed in the blind spot like a shark circling wounded prey. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Amy Richardson, fired precision strikes at the cruiser's maneuvering thrusters, and within 2 minutes, the massive alien ship was spinning helplessly through space. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out, and human ships used the asteroids as weapons. They fired tractor beams at massive rocks and hurled them at enemy vessels like ancient humans throwing stones at predators. They coordinated their attacks with split-second timing, and 3 or 4 ships would focus all fire on one target's shields until they collapsed and then immediately move to the next target before the enemy could respond. The Krelvin had numerical superiority and individually stronger ships and better shields, but humans had something else entirely. 10,000 years of warfare and genocide and tribal conflict had taught them every dirty trick ever invented. They fought without honor or rules, and they used every advantage no matter how small. They were creative and vicious, and they absolutely refused to fight fair. Aboard the Defiance, Manning watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction, and his earlier smile was gone, now replaced by the cold focus of a commander in battle. "Status report," he ordered, and his voice was clipped and efficient. 4 ghost ships have sustained damage but are still operational. Grant reported from her station. The TSS Valiant has lost forward shields, and her port weapons are offline. She paused and checked her data. No casualties, yet on our side, but we have 6 wounded from that last barrage. Enemy forces show 6 vessels destroyed, and 18 still offline and 23 engaged and taking damage. Time until their disabled reactors restore, Manning asked, and he was already calculating his next move. 7 minutes, sir, Brooks answered from sensors, and his face was pale with stress. Sir, 3 more Krelvin ships are breaking off and trying to flank us from the asteroid field, and they are moving fast. Redirect the Valiant and the Ranger to intercept, Manning ordered without hesitation. Tell Torres to use pattern Delta 4 and hit them from below, where their shields are weakest. He turned to Grant. All ships priority target the disabled vessels and disable their backup reactors before they come online. Use non-lethal methods if possible, but do not take unnecessary risks. It was calculated mercy and tactical brilliance combined. Dead Krelvin could not warn their empire about human capabilities and would only create martyrs and calls for revenge. But defeated and humiliated Krelvin who went home alive would spread the word far more effectively, and they would tell stories about human tactics that would make other species think twice before attacking. Admiral, the flagship is hailing us, Sullivan announced, and her voice held surprise. Commander Zekthar appears to want to talk. On screen, Manning ordered, and he straightened his uniform. The Krelvin commander appeared, and he looked nothing like the confident warrior from 3 days ago. His bridge was dark and damaged, and emergency lights cast strange shadows across his scaled face. You have technology beyond what our intelligence suggested, and you have tactics we cannot counter, and you fight without honor, striking from shadows and using tricks and deceptions. His voice held anger but also something else, and it sounded almost like respect, or maybe fear. Manning's expression hardened, and his voice became cold as vacuum. You threatened to bombard a civilian colony from orbit, and you planned to kill millions of innocent people, and you dare talk to me about honor. He leaned forward, and his eyes blazed with controlled fury. We gave you 72 hours to leave, and we warned you what would happen, and we broadcast messages explaining that humans prefer peace, but excel at war. You chose to stay, and you chose to attack, and now you complain that we fight to win. Zekthar was silent for a long moment, and behind him his crew worked frantically to restore systems. What are your terms for our surrender? He finally asked, and the words seemed to physically pain him. And there it was, in the moment that would define humanity's place in this region of space for generations to come. Manning glanced at Grant, who gave him a small nod, and he had already discussed this possibility with Earth Command before the battle began. They had given him authority to negotiate within certain parameters, and now he would use that authority. You will withdraw all forces from this system immediately, and you will transmit a full report to your empire, explaining exactly what happened here. Manning spoke clearly, and his words would be recorded and transmitted across the galaxy. You will deliver a message, and human space is not for conquest, and we seek peace and trade with all species willing to offer the same. He paused and let his next words carry weight. But if challenged or threatened or attacked, we will respond with overwhelming, creative, and utterly disproportionate force. We are humans, Commander Zekthar, and we colonized every deadly environment on our homeworld before we reached the stars. We split atoms and touched distant suns, and we never ever stop innovating new ways to fight and survive and win. He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. Now get your ships out of our system and tell your empire to leave humanity alone, or the next time we meet, we will not be so merciful. Zekthar stared at Manning for a long moment, and something passed between them, and an understanding between warriors who had both seen combat and knew its costs. We will withdraw, and we will deliver your message. He hesitated, then added in a quieter tone. You defeated us, human, but you did not slaughter us when you could have, and that is noted and remembered. The transmission ended, and the bridge crew erupted in cheers and relief. They had won, and they had survived, and the colony was safe. Manning let them celebrate for exactly 30 seconds before he raised his hand for silence. We are not done yet, and the battle is over, but we still have wounded to treat, and ships to repair, and a colony to protect. He looked at each crew member in turn. You all performed with courage and skill today, and you have honored the fleet and humanity itself. But now, we have work to do. All department heads report damage and casualty status, and begin recovery operations immediately. As the crew returned to their duties, Manning sank into his command chair and felt the exhaustion hit him like a wave. Grant moved closer and spoke quietly so only he could hear. We won, sir, and we actually won. Manning nodded slowly and watched the Krelvan fleet beginning to withdraw, and their ships limping away from human space. We won this battle, Lisa. But the real work starts now. He gestured at the view screen where the Krelvan ships were disappearing. They are going to tell their empire what happened, and other species will hear about it, and soon everyone in this part of the galaxy will know that humans can be beaten by numbers, but not easily, and not without cost. Is that what you wanted, sir? Grant asked, and her voice held genuine curiosity. Manning smiled that small smile again, and it was tired but genuine. What I wanted was peace, and what I got was a chance to show the galaxy that humans are not victims waiting to be conquered. He stood up and stretched his sore muscles. Now, maybe we can have that peace, and maybe other species will choose negotiation over aggression, because they know what happens if they choose wrong. The battle was over, and humanity had won, but Manning knew this was just the beginning of something much larger. 3 weeks after the Battle of Kepler Station, the galaxy was still processing what had happened, and trying to understand how a minor species like humanity had defeated the legendary Krelvan Empire. The Krelvan had ruled their sector for 3 centuries and crushed dozens of civilizations, but they had been beaten by 12 visible ships and a ghost fleet that appeared from nowhere. News traveled fast in the galaxy, and soon every species with a radio telescope knew about the humans who smiled when challenged. On Earth, at the Terran Fleet Command headquarters in Geneva, Admiral Patricia Cole sat in a classified briefing room with the Fleet Council. The holographic display showed a star map of known space, and new markers appeared almost daily as more species reached out to make contact. Cole was a veteran of 40 years in the fleet, and she had seen humanity grow from a single-planet species to a growing interstellar power. But even she was surprised by the response to Kepler. These are the diplomatic inquiries we have received since the battle, Commander Daniel Foster said from his position at the intelligence station. 47 different species have requested formal meetings and trade negotiations. The Zathari Collective wants to discuss a mutual defense pact, and even the Hive Worlds have sent an observer delegation. He pulled up more data, and the numbers kept growing. And the Krelvan Cole asked, and her voice was calm, but everyone knew this was the critical question. A wounded predator was often more dangerous than a healthy one, and the Krelvan Empire had just suffered a humiliating defeat. Complete withdrawal from the border zones, Foster reported. Their empire is in chaos, and apparently losing to a species with only 12 visible ships has caused a political crisis. He smiled slightly. 3 regional governors have declared independence, claiming the Central Command is unfit to lead if they cannot defeat humans. Council member George Palmer, who represented the colonial interests, leaned forward in his chair. We need to be careful here, and we won the battle, but we are not prepared for a full-scale war if the Krelvan Empire decides they need to restore their reputation through revenge. His concern was valid, and everyone in the room knew it. Cole shook her head, and her expression was confident. They will not attack us again, and we have been monitoring their communications through various channels. She pulled up intercepted transmissions and translation algorithms. They are terrified, and not of our ships specifically, but of what else we might have hidden. Admiral Manning's bluff about the asteroid field worked better than we hoped, and now half the galaxy thinks we have secret weapons we have not revealed yet. Palmer raised an eyebrow, and his voice held curiosity. Do we have secret weapons that we have not revealed yet? Cole smiled slightly, and it was the same smile Manning had used against the Krelvan. Yes, but not in the way they think, and our secret weapon is human nature itself. She stood and walked to the star map. We adapt faster than any species we have encountered, and we innovate under pressure, and we absolutely refuse to accept that something is impossible." She pointed to Earth on the display. "Every species out there looks at problems and asks how to solve them with existing technology. But humans look at problems and invent new technology to solve them." On the display, another marker appeared, indicating a new diplomatic inquiry. "Another request," Foster announced. "This one is from the Vex Concordat, and they want detailed information about our stealth technology, and they are offering very generous trade terms." "Denied," Cole said immediately, and her tone left no room for argument. "We will share cultural exchanges and scientific collaboration in neutral fields, but military technology stays classified. The moment everyone knows how we won at Kepler, we lose our advantage, and other species will develop countermeasures." Foster nodded and made notes on his tablet. "Understood, and I will send the diplomatic refusal with appropriate language." He hesitated, then added, "We have another situation developing, and one of the species that witnessed our victory has declared us their protectors." Cole's eyes narrowed, and this was not good news. "Which species and what exactly did they declare?" The Drex Foster answered. "They are a small civilization, with only 3 colonized systems, and the Krelvan have been threatening them for years. Now they have announced that humanity is their official protector, and they are requesting we defend them against future Krelvan expansion." "Absolutely not," Palmer interjected, and his voice was sharp. "We cannot become the galaxy's police force, and we barely have enough ships to defend our own colonies. If we start taking on client species, we will be stretched too thin and vulnerable." Cole considered this carefully, and she understood both perspectives. "Daniel, tell the Drex that we are honored by their trust, but humanity does not take client species or vassals." She thought for a moment, then added, "However, we would be happy to discuss a technology exchange program, and if they want protection, we will teach them to protect themselves." Foster looked surprised. "You want to share defensive technology with them? And that sets a dangerous precedent." "No," Cole said firmly. "It sets exactly the precedent I want, and it creates allies instead of dependents." She pulled up the Drex homeworld on the display. "If we start sharing defensive technology, then we create a network of species who can defend themselves and who owe us goodwill instead of tribute." She turned to face the council. "The next time someone decides to play conqueror, they will not just face humanity, and they will face the idea of humanity spreading across the galaxy. Self-determination and mutual aid, and the absolute refusal to kneel to bullies." Palmer was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That is actually brilliant, and we create a buffer zone of friendly species who can help defend the region. It is cheaper than building more ships, and more effective than trying to patrol everything ourselves." The meeting continued for another 2 hours, and they discussed trade agreements and territorial boundaries, and the complex web of galactic politics that Earth had suddenly become central to. New species contacted them every day, and some wanted trade, while others wanted alliances, and a few wanted to test humanity's resolve, with small provocations. Cole handled each situation with a mix of diplomacy and carefully calculated shows of force. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim, Captain Helen Drake was conducting her own form of diplomacy with methods that were less official but equally effective. The TSS Phantom hung in space near a neutral trading station, and her stealth systems were deactivated as a gesture of good faith. Drake sat in her ready room across a holographic table from Captain Velshara of the Independent Freighter Guild. "Your people made quite an impression," Velshara said, "and her species, the Trell, were natural traders, who respected strength above all else. The guilds are very interested in establishing regular routes through human space, and we have goods from 100 worlds." Drake leaned back in her chair, and her expression was friendly but firm. "We welcome trade, and we want to do business with the guilds, but we have standards and rules. No slave goods and no biological weapons, and no exploitation of pre-spaceflight species." She met Velshara's 4 eyes directly. "Those are non-negotiable terms." Velshara's translator conveyed what sounded like amusement. "You sound like you are trying to civilize the galaxy, and most species gave up on morality once they reached the stars." "No," Drake corrected, and her voice hardened slightly. "We are just making clear what we will not tolerate in our space, and what you do in your own territory is your business." She smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "But if you want to do business with humanity, then you play by our rules, and if you do not like our rules, then you do not get access to human markets or human technology or human protection." "And if someone refuses?" Velshara asked, and her tone held genuine curiosity. "Then they do not get to trade with the species that just defeated the Krelvan Empire with 12 ships," Drake said calmly. She pulled up a star map, showing human space and the surrounding regions. "I think most traders will see the value in cooperation, especially when the alternative is being shut out of the fastest-growing market in this sector." Velshara made a chittering sound that her translator rendered as laughter. "You humans are dangerous, and not because of your weapons but because of your ideas." She gestured at Drake with one of her manipulator arms. "You actually believe in things like principles and honor and justice, and most species outgrow such notions after a few centuries in space." "That is the difference," Drake said quietly. "We do not see them as notions to outgrow, and we see them as foundations to build on." She stood and walked to the viewport, where stars shone like diamonds on black velvet. "Every species we meet has a choice, and they can stand with us and benefit from trade and cooperation and mutual defense, or they can stand against us and learn what happened to the Krelvan." She turned back to face the alien captain. "But there is no neutral ground anymore, and the galaxy is changing, and humanity is going to be a major part of that change, whether others like it or not." Velshara was quiet for a long moment. Then she made a gesture that her species used to signal agreement. "The guilds will accept your terms, and we will spread the word that human space is open for honest trade." She paused, then added, "But be careful, human, and you are making enemies as well as friends. And not everyone will be as reasonable as the Krelvan proved to be." Drake smiled, and it was genuine this time. "We are counting on it. And nothing unites humanity faster than a common enemy." She extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. "Welcome to the new order, Captain, and I think you will find that doing business with humans is very profitable for those who play fair." As Velshara's ship departed the station, Drake stood at the viewport and watched it go. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had gone from irrelevant newcomers to major players in just 3 weeks. Some species would welcome the change and seek alliance and trade, but others would resist and test human resolve and try to put the upstart humans back in their place. Drake smiled that same smile that Manning had used and that Cole had perfected. Let them try, and humanity had been fighting and winning for 10,000 years, and they were just getting started. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler Station, the galaxy had settled into a new equilibrium, and the balance of power had shifted in ways that no one could have predicted. Human space had transformed from a collection of isolated colonies into a thriving hub of activity and trade. Dozens of species had established embassies and trading posts and cultural exchanges, and the name Terra was now spoken with respect across 1,000 worlds. Admiral Jacob Manning walked through the newly constructed Kepler station, and he still could not quite believe how much had changed. What had been a simple colony 6 months ago was now a massive spaceport and diplomatic center. The station's observation deck offered a spectacular view of the planet below and the stars beyond, and Manning often came here to think and remember. Captain Helen Drake joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee, and this human tradition had become somewhat famous among the alien species who visited the station. "The Zathari ambassador tried this yesterday," Drake said as she handed Manning a cup. "He said it tasted like liquid regret, and asked why humans voluntarily drank it." Manning laughed and took a sip of the bitter hot liquid. "Did you tell him that the taste of regret is half the appeal, and that humans have strange relationships with things that are bad for us?" "I told him it builds character," Drake replied with a grin. He did not understand the concept, but he was polite about it. She stood beside Manning, and together they watched ships come and go through the station. Terran vessels mixed with alien freighters and diplomatic shuttles, and even a few Krelvan traders who were brave enough to test the new relationship between their empire and humanity. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing?" Manning asked quietly. "We could have just evacuated the colony and avoided the whole confrontation, and no one would have died." Drake was silent for a moment, and her expression became thoughtful. "Every day," she admitted, But then I remember that running away would have told the galaxy that humans could be pushed around and that our colonies were negotiable and that we would abandon our people to save our ships. She turned to face Manning directly. What message would that have sent to every other species out there, looking for easy targets? Manning nodded slowly, and he had thought about this question many times over the past 6 months. My grandfather told me something when I was young, and he was a soldier in the last major war on Earth. He said that peace is not the absence of conflict but the presence of justice. He took another sip of coffee. If we had run, we would have had temporary peace but no justice, and within a year the Krelvin or someone else would have attacked another colony. And now, Drake prompted, now the galaxy knows that humans protect their own, and that we are creative and dangerous and absolutely committed to defending what is ours. Manning gestured at the busy spaceport around them. But they also know we are fair and willing to trade, and that we prefer peace to war. We did not start that fight, Helen, but we finished it in a way that makes the next fight much less appealing to potential aggressors. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan approached them, and her tablet showed the latest status reports. Admiral, the new security protocols are online, and the station defense grid is operational. She swiped through screens of data. We have 6 ships on permanent patrol, and the colony is now better defended than most sector capitals. Good, Manning said approvingly. And the diplomatic wing, how are Ambassador Carol Hughes and her team managing? Sullivan smiled and her eyes showed pride. Successfully negotiating trade agreements with 18 species, and the technology exchange program is ahead of schedule. She paused, and her smile grew wider. And the Drex have formally announced the formation of something they are calling the Free Worlds Coalition, and they are using our mutual defense model as their template. Manning raised an eyebrow in surprise. A coalition? And how many members do they have? 7 species so far, Sullivan reported. All from systems that were threatened by the Krelvin Empire, and they are calling it the human model. She read from her tablet. Rel the Bod, Krelvin species, independent species maintaining their sovereignty, but committing to mutual defense and shared principles of non-aggression and trade. Drake laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. We accidentally started a political movement, and we just wanted to protect one colony. Not accidental, Manning corrected her gently. Inevitable is a better word. He turned to look out at the stars again. Humans have always been at our best when we inspire others to be better, and we did not conquer the galaxy or force anyone to join us. He paused and chose his words carefully. We showed them there was an alternative to conquest and domination, and that strength could be used to protect instead of oppress. Sullivan's tablet chimed with an incoming priority transmission. Sir, we have a communication from Earth Command, and it is marked Priority Alpha. She looked up at Manning with curiosity. They want to speak with you and Captain Drake immediately. Put it through to the command center, Manning ordered. Helen, you are coming with me, and I suspect this is going to be interesting. In the station's command center, the holographic display activated and showed Admiral Patricia Cole sitting in her office at Geneva. Behind her, through the windows, Earth rotated slowly, and the blue and white sphere looked peaceful and beautiful. Jacob and Helen, congratulations on your promotions, Cole said without preamble. Jacob, you are now Vice Admiral, and Helen, you are Rear Admiral, and your new assignments are ready. Thank you, ma'am, they both replied, and Manning felt a mix of pride and apprehension. Promotions during peacetime usually meant new challenges and responsibilities. Cole's expression became more serious and businesslike. Jacob, you are taking command of the new 4th Fleet, and we have 30 ships ready for you, all newly constructed and incorporating everything we learned at Kepler. Your mission is to establish and maintain security for the outer colonies and to show the flag in regions where humanity needs a visible presence. 30 ships, Manning repeated, and he was impressed. That was more than double what he had commanded before. Earth was clearly investing heavily in the fleet. Cole turned her attention to Drake. Helen, you are taking over Ghostwing expansion, and we are building 40 more stealth ships. She smiled slightly. Apparently every species in the galaxy either wants to buy them or is terrified we will use them again, and either way we need more capability. 40 ships, Drake said, and her eyes widened. That is almost triple our current strength, And the training requirements alone will be massive. You will have the resources you need, Cole assured her. The Council has authorized a significant expansion of the fleet, and humanity is no longer playing defense. She leaned forward, and her expression became intense. We are not becoming conquerors, but we are making it clear that we are a major power and that attacking human interests will be costly. What about the Krelvin? Manning asked. Are they still a threat, or have they learned their lesson? Cole pulled up intelligence reports on her display. Remarkably quiet, and they have pulled back to their core systems and are restructuring their entire military. She showed encrypted communications and strategic assessments. Our analysts believe they are trying to figure out how to fight an enemy like us and developing new tactics and technologies. Good luck to them, Drake muttered. By the time they figure out our current tactics, we will have invented completely new ones. Exactly, Cole agreed. That is our advantage, and we innovate faster than any other species, and we adapt, and we refuse to be predictable. She changed the display to show unexplored regions of space. We have also received reports of unexplored sectors beyond the rim and new species we have not contacted yet, and potentially new threats. What are the first contact protocols? Manning asked. How are we supposed to approach unknown species after what happened with the Krelvin? The Council is drafting new guidelines, Cole said. The proposal is simple, and we approach everyone with open hands but ready weapons. She met both their eyes through the hologram. We offer peace and trade and cooperation, but we make it absolutely clear that we are not prey, and we are not victims, and we are not targets. We are humans. Drake nodded in understanding. We show them the carrot and the stick simultaneously, and let them choose which one they want. Cole smiled, and it was approving. What you two did at Kepler changed everything, and you proved that humanity does not need to be the biggest, or the oldest, or the most technologically advanced. She gestured at a star map showing human space and the growing network of allies. We just need to be ourselves and creative and stubborn and maybe a little bit crazy and absolutely unwilling to back down when we know we are right. The Krelvin challenged the Terran fleet, Manning said softly, and the phrase had become almost legendary in the past 6 months. Drake completed the thought with a small smile. And humans just smiled because we knew something they did not know. What was that? Cole asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. That the fight was over before it began, Manning replied. They just had not realized it yet, and by the time they understood what was happening, they had already lost. Cole nodded in satisfaction. Get your fleets ready, both of you, and the galaxy is watching, and humanity has work to do. She paused, and her expression became almost philosophical. Not conquest and not domination, but something better and harder and more important. She leaned back in her chair. We are going to show every species out there what it means to be human, and to protect the weak, and to stand for principles, and to face every challenge with courage and yes, with that particular smile. The one that says, "We have already won," Sullivan suggested from her station. Exactly, Cole confirmed. The galaxy challenged us, and they thought we were just another minor species trying to survive in a hostile universe. She smiled, that same smile they all knew so well. They did not understand that humans do not just survive, and we thrive, and we excel. And when someone pushes us, we push back hard enough that they never forget why that was a terrible mistake. The transmission ended, and Manning and Drake stood in the command center looking at the displays, showing the ever-expanding human sphere of influence. 30 ships for you, and 40 for me, Drake said thoughtfully. That is quite an upgrade from 12 visible ships and 16 ghosts. The galaxy is taking notice, Manning agreed. Every species out there is recalculating their strategies and deciding whether they want to be friends or enemies or stay neutral. He turned to face Drake. But the real question is what happens when someone decides to test us again, because you know someone will eventually. Then we remind them what happened to the Krelvin, Drake said simply. We smile and we prepare and we show them that challenging humanity is always a losing proposition. Manning walked back to the observation deck and watched the stars and the ships and the future taking shape before his eyes. 6 months ago, they had been defending one colony with 12 ships against impossible odds. Now humanity was a rising power with allies and respect, and a reputation that preceded them across the galaxy. Some species called them dangerous, and others called them inspiring, but everyone called them formidable. Vice Admiral Sullivan said, as she joined him at the viewport. The Krelvin have sent another formal communication, and it is addressed to you personally. Put it through, Manning ordered, and he wondered what Zekthar wanted now. The screen showed the former Krelvin commander, and he looked different than he had during the battle. He wore different insignia now, and his bearing was less military and more diplomatic. Admiral Manning, or should I say Vice Admiral, and congratulations on your promotion. I am now serving as an ambassador, and my empire has sent me to deliver a final message. I am listening, Manning replied neutrally. 6 months ago we challenged your fleet, because we believed you were weak, Zekthar said, and his translator gave his words a formal quality. We saw 12 ships, and assumed you were desperate, and we did not understand that those ships represented something far more dangerous than weapons. He paused, and seemed to choose his next words carefully. They represented human determination and creativity and unity, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Manning said nothing, and he wanted to hear where this was going. My people have a saying, Zekthar continued. The strongest warrior knows when not to fight. And humanity taught us that there is something stronger than being the largest empire, or having the most ships. She gestured with his 4 arms. It is being smart enough, and creative enough, and principled enough, that others choose not to fight you at all because they know the cost will be too high. That is a hard lesson to learn, Manning acknowledged. It is, Zekthar agreed. But it is learned, and the Krelvin Empire wishes to formalize our peace, and to establish trade, and to put the past behind us. He leaned forward slightly. You defeated us, but you did not destroy us, and you gave us the chance to withdraw with some measure of honor. That is a gift we will not forget. Manning considered this carefully, and he glanced at Drake, who gave a small nod of approval. Commander, on behalf of the Terran fleet, and with authority from Earth Command, I accept your proposal. He stood straighter. Let us turn yesterday's enemies into tomorrow's partners, and show the galaxy that even the fiercest conflicts can end in mutual respect. That is very human of you, Admiral Zekthar said, and his tone held genuine respect. To see opportunity where others see only ashes, and to build bridges where others build walls. After the transmission ended, Manning found himself alone on the observation deck, and the stars seemed brighter somehow, and more full of possibility. The battle was over, and the war was over, and now came the harder part of building a lasting peace. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was taking on impossible challenges and making them look easy. Years later, historians would mark the Battle of Kepler Station as the moment humanity announced itself as a major galactic power. But it was not the weapons, or the tactics, or even the victory that mattered most. It was the message that echoed across 1,000 worlds and through 100 species. Humans were not conquerors, and they were not victims, and they were something entirely new. A species that combined deadly competence with genuine principles, and that could smile calmly when facing impossible odds, because they had already calculated 17 different ways to win. They challenged the Terran fleet, and humans just smiled. That smile said everything that needed saying, and it told the galaxy that humanity was here to stay, and that anyone foolish enough to test them would learn the same lesson the Krelvin had learned. Humans protected their own, and humans fought with creativity and courage, and they never ever backed down from a just cause. The galaxy would remember, and the memory would shape interstellar politics for generations to come.